The Drum Candy podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into episode 10 of season 5 of the Drum Candy podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson, coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In this special episode, guest hosts Thomas Wendt and David Throckmorton are interviewing the great Pittsburgh bassist Paul Thompson. Both Tom and Dave had played countless gigs with Paul over the years. Dave toured with Paul with Maynard Ferguson, and Tom and Paul played hundreds, if not thousands, of gigs here around Pittsburgh and in other situations. So this was a chance for two drummers to talk with the bass player that they probably have the longest history with. They've logged in the most hours. They came up together. So there's a bit of history about the importance of finding your like-minded people of your tribe, the importance of the drum bass hookup, and we listened to a few different recordings that the three of them all just absolutely loved, how the drums and the bass work together. So this is a really fun episode. I got to kick back and just listen to three old friends just hang out. So here we go. This is Tom and Dave with Paul Thompson.
Well, we're back for another sort of guest hosting of the Drum Candy podcast, and we've done these 10 Reasons to Love videos, but today we're going to introduce a new element to the podcast. So for those of you who might be watching one of these for the first time, we're filming these in Pittsburgh, PA, and Dave and myself are this is where we live, and we're on the scene here, and we're welcoming our really good friend and musical colleague, one of the great bassists of the world, Mr. Paul Thompson, who Dave and I have known and played with for a long time now. And because we focus so much on drummers, we thought it would be a good idea to talk to somebody who plays the instrument that is very important to us, which is the bass. The relationship between bass players and drummers is important and unique, I think, as far as how different, players of instruments have relationships within groups of varying kinds. For us, the bass player is really important no matter what kind of music you're playing. And I think I'm looking forward to hearing the bass perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I know that I've learned a lot as a drummer talking to bass players who I play with, and they say, "Why are you doing this?" Or "I like when you do that," or "I hate when you do that." It's very informative. And I think for especially younger drummers who might be watching and who are trying to learn how to play music in different settings, I think hearing the bass perspective is important. And we both have a long history with Paul, and certain recordings are really important for us, and certain bass players and drummer teams, rhythm teams, are really important throughout the history of the music. So I thought we could just sort of start by, sort of talking about that, how we work with bass players, the different things that have to happen in the music for the music to work. There's so much that's unsaid and said at the same time,
Well, it's funny, just you saying that, like when you mentioned talking to bass players and them saying, "I like when you do that, I don't like when you do that." I don't know that we've ever really talked so much about our relationship to each other, but we've done so many different styles of music. I guess just knowing each other through talking about all the other music, you figure out maybe what your relationship is going to be, and then just through playing, you figure other things out.
Well, that I think that's probably a good place to start, because I met you. You guys are just a little older than me, but I met Paul when I was about 16, and you guys met each other. How old? Because you guys are just about the same age. So how old were you when you guys first met each other?
I feel like we were probably like 18. Yeah. I was probably 18. Maybe you were 17.
Maybe 19, 18.
Okay,
possibly.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right around the same time.
So I'll say this, not to cut you off, but our friend Paul Wells, who has done one of these with us before, a couple of these with us. Paul and I met because we were both drummers, and Paul and Wells and Paul Thompson were childhood friends. So I would always hear about PT, as I call him, before we got to meet. And then eventually we ended up playing together, I think through like a Duquesne.
Yeah, it was. I think it was through
John
John
Horn? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Guitar player friend. I think we played on either like a, what are those things called? Like a
Recital?
A recital.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, so we knew each other in our late teens, and like you're younger, so you were probably around the same time, maybe a year or two later or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And I think we were playing a mixture the first time we played of like funk, jazz, fusion, like a mixture of those things.
Yeah.
And I remember, I mean, I could say just playing first, I was so young, I was just excited to play with someone else who was
Absolutely. Yeah.
my age that was interested in the music.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you had to say, about that.
No, I agree totally. You two were both some of the only drummers I've ever played with, just the two of us.
Yes.
I vividly remember driving down to Washington so that you and I could play.
Yeah.
I vividly remember going over your house
In Sewickley.
and us playing together.
bedroom,
just
yep.
the two of us playing tunes, playing tempos.
Yep.
I think I did that also with Greg Humphreys, a great drummer in town.
Yeah.
We talked about
Roger's
a little
nephew.
bit with James
James.
Johnson,
Yep.
who
Who's also
was
been on here. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, we really, early on, we developed this kind of intrinsic kind of relationship. But you're definitely right. We didn't talk a lot about, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Are you speeding up? Are you slowing down? I don't like this. I really like this. It was kind of, I trust you. Let's play and see what happens. And that's made our relationship collectively, really special, because I can play with either one of you guys and we don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
And the music can happen how it's going to happen. And whatever happens, I know that there's a level of trust where it's going to be
Especially
okay.
now, we have 30-some years behind
Absolutely.
us. But I think even young, there was that feeling of this guy checks out music, he plays with all these different great musicians. I'm going to learn from him. Hopefully he can learn something from me.
And it was exciting, too, finding other people in your tribe, so to speak,
Oh, yeah.
I remember us meeting, and we were talking about that one Spyro Gyra record.
I
It
wonder
had
which
just
one.
come out, the one
Okay.
with Joe Rosenblatt.
Joe Rosenblatt, yeah.
And we just started rattling off, oh, do you know this tune? And then we'd play the groove.
Oh,
do you know
wow.
that other tune? And we play
Wow,
the groove
that's
from
cool.
it.
That's
And we
cool.
did that as well. Oh, do you know this? Do you know this? Let's do this tune.
Yeah.
Like there was this language that we learned how to speak together that was really, really cool. But we jumped into it at a young age.
Yeah.
I think I think we should mention the fact that, not to differentiate, but the fact that back then there was no internet.
Right.
We were getting together and playing together. Listening to stuff together. We did that a lot. I remember going to 2005 Tustin.
Yes.
You would play stuff. And,
Yes.
like that was that personal interaction.
Sure.
I think it helped us develop musically, but just as friends.
Well, and I know we joke sometimes too, Paul and I, about like back then you'd lend somebody a cassette or a VHS tape that so and so dubbed from so and so. So like there was no YouTube, there was no Spotify, there was no Apple Music. So it's like you check this stuff out and then you trust your friend, like, oh, you got to hear this record.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
maybe I don't get it on the first listen. I need to
Yes.
give it some time because I want to know what's so great about it.
Yeah.
Oh,
I've
and then it's
had a
like,
lot of
man,
memories
let me get my tape back.
Well, I have a funny memory. Years ago, there's a drummer in town, great guy, great drummer, Lou Ross.
Yeah.
And Lou was always the guy that would get the stuff
Yeah.
before everybody.
Especially video.
Yeah, videos, yeah.
And I remember being in his living room with like 10 other guys watching like Miles Davis,
Yeah.
the video that's on YouTube now,
Yeah.
where they're all in tuxedos, the
Yeah.
black and white one. I remember being in his living room with 10 other people watching that video. Because you just, Lou's got it.
Yeah.
And we'd go over to Lou's house
Yeah, that's
and watch
crazy.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we gotta get Lou on here, by the way.
He would be great. Yeah, he would be great.
Well, can I say something real quick?
Go ahead.
When Paul and I first started playing together, for the first bunch of years, I would say the majority of it, almost all of it, was electric bass and drums.
Interesting.
Where yours was probably the
Opposite.
opposite. So, and it's funny, I think now it's probably 90% acoustic bass and a little bit of electric still. And that hookup is still there,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
from all the years of playing together. And also, both instruments, the fact that I play with you so much on either helps the other.
Totally.
regardless of style.
Totally.
So, yeah, when you guys started playing, it was all acoustic bass, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The first time I played with you was at the Balcony Anniversary Jam Session
Wow.
in like 1990.
Was that 97?
94.
Oh my gosh.
It was before I started going to Kappa, because I remember that night telling you, like, yeah, I'm going to go to Kappa next year. And you were like, oh, that's great. You'll be with James. And, yeah.
It's a long time ago.
And I remember you gave me your phone number by telling me, oh, boy, Al, on the
wow.
the number, the letters.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I forgot all about that.
642-6925.
Yeah. I've done that a bunch of times.
Oh my goodness.
But I think when you're younger as a drummer, trying to figure out, when you play different grooves and different styles, like how to offer your beat to the music, like that's a huge thing between the bass player and the drummer, because somebody can be a little more on top, somebody can be a little behind, and it can work. But it's like figuring that out. That's such an art to do that. And there's not one way to do it. There's a lot of ways you can do it. But I know for me, that was one of the biggest things about getting a chance to play with you. Is like, okay, because I have if I have a tendency to rush or drag, I drag. So I have to be, and like learning how to make the music feel good with the bass player. That's such a huge learning experience of being able to. And you can't do that playing with records.
Right.
No, yeah.
You can learn a lot playing with records, but man, you got to learn how to work that out with another
Well,
human
the record's
being.
the same every time you play to it.
That's what I'm saying.
There's no
Give and
there's no
take. So to develop that relationship with another person that's the art of playing music.
Yeah.
At least playing with other people, and it takes time. Like you can't just. You know what I mean? And I think that's part of the relationship between bass players and drummers is, and it's like when you play with a drummer you've never played with before, what's the first thing that you're listening for?
Oh my God, I'm seeing where their beat is. Where's my beat? How can we intersect? Are they listening? Are they going to be flexible? Are we both going to be flexible, or are they going to go, here it is, you got to come to me?
All that.
There's
Yep.
a lot of, of listening that
Yes.
happens. You were there, what was it, 6 months ago, Kenny Washington, when you brought Kenny Washington into town. That was really fascinating to me.
For me too.
I I listened to so many records that he's on,
Sure.
so many records, and to play with him was a total different experience.
Yeah.
The way
Yes.
his beat felt,
Yeah.
and how he listened.
Yeah.
And it wasn't as perfect or as forced.
Yes.
There was a lot of flexibility in how he played and where he laid it.
Yeah.
And then somebody like, I played a gig with Tane,
Yeah.
Jeff Watts, it was pre-COVID, so probably 4 years ago. And the way he plays, I was so intimidated. And immediately, as soon as we started playing time, it was like this.
Bang. Yeah.
Like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, so are they listening? Like, I'm really trying to hone in. Some guys, it just happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is really cool.
Yep.
And with both of you, I mean, I'm spoiled. You two, as
James,
well as
Roger.
James
James,
and
Roger, yeah.
Like, it's just like this for me. It just happens.
Yeah.
Well, we're the ones that are spoiled, but I hear you.
No, for sure.
But it's interesting because, like, that, not to go back to that thing with Wash, we talked about this a little. What I realized after watching that was, I've seen him play a lot over the years, but I've always seen him play with people who he's played a lot with. And that he has a really good rapport with. Like bass players, like I've seen him play with Ron Carter, Ray Drummond, Peter Washington. He has great rapports with them. But I've never seen him play with two musicians that he had never met before.
That's interesting.
And what I got from watching it was, he was really kind of laying back, like listening and watching to what you were. He wasn't like, no, this. He was like, okay, what are they doing? Okay, let me just figure, you know what I mean? And you guys played like 4 tunes.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't enough time to really.
Yeah.
But that was interesting. It was like watching him play with people he had never played with. I had never seen that before. So that was informative, you know? But anyway, yeah, there's learning to develop that. And like you said, when we play with bass players you never played with, We're all listening for the same thing. Where they place it, where are they feeling the beat? Are they flexible?
Every category you named or little thing you listen for, it's all the same stuff.
Yeah,
you
totally.
know? And it's so important to be thinking about all those things if you want to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah,
You
which
know?
some people do. And some people
Yeah,
don't.
and because I've played with people that I've heard about how great they were.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then you play with them and you're like, oh yeah, they are great. I've heard them play with other people and loved it. And then you have a hard time playing with certain people. Not everybody's meant to play together.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I still love their playing with other people.
Yep.
But a few bass players I play with, it's been really tough. It's like, okay, even if I say I'm going to just try to follow them around all night,
It's still hard.
it's still hard.
Yeah.
Because it could go, it's not consistent maybe.
No, I've had
you
the
know?
same experience.
So I enjoy some kind of a consistency where you can kind of assess what it's going to be. Then you at least have an idea of, okay, this is going to work. Now I can just play.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and for me, I think the key is just always listening to. Like, we're probably too guilty, and you guys probably do the same thing. But there's a lot of like, my bad. You know,
The whole gig is
my
my
fault.
bad.
like you one little flam. we're
Dude,
like,
it's-
I'm sorry.
I'm always the one going like, sorry.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be said. It's just like I know I screwed that up.
And I know that you know that I screwed that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's nice. It's nice to have. I mean, I've said this before in like interviews or like when we've done performances and had to talk. Like, I've easily played with you more than any other musician in my life.
That's
you know?
probably true for me too.
Yeah, which is crazy.
If I had to, yeah.
My condolences for you.
No, are you
No,
kidding
man,
me?
There's a reason.
gosh.
There's a reason for that.
You've been making me sound good for 30 years. Better than I do sound anyway.
And I think that's what it is. It's like it's happened so much that you really do know each other's places. And it's like, this has been a really nice compliment that we've gotten as a team. Like, some younger musicians I know have come up to us and said, man, I hope one day we have a connection like you and Paul have.
Sure,
It's like,
absolutely.
oh, that's really nice to hear. And like, you almost don't even think about it like that. It's just like, oh yeah, we play.
Well, I mean,
But if you play without him, then it comes back, you're like, oh, thank God. Like, this is going to be so easy.
well,
you know?
I'm sure you've had this experience too. I mean, I love playing with different musicians. I really like playing with younger musicians just because it's a learning thing. But if you've had a few gigs away from a bass player who you have a real rapport with, when you play with them, it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
this is easy actually. You know what I mean?
And those other relationships are really great too.
Of course.
But there really is something special between bass and drums. It's
There is.
unlike any other instrument.
We basically, we have to play more than anyone else in the band. We're always playing, basically, you know? And we have to learn how to play with other people as a team. Because, I mean, like, you and I have played with so many different people. Like, tomorrow we're playing with two great saxophonists in a chordless group, which we've done before, but it's like we played that nice trio gig with Steve Rudolph, which was fun, and it's very different. And learning, one of the things I think, especially for rhythm section players, it's the art of accompaniment. How do you play with people? How do you make it work? How do you make what they're doing speak and have meaning? Because a lot of times it's up to us as rhythm teams to, like, we come into a situation and it's like we're playing this music that I wrote, this is kind of what I want, and it's like it's up to us to make something out of that.
Yeah.
And that's a big challenge, and I think you have to be able to play well together, but you also have to know a lot about the history of the music, because we were just talking about someone will hand you a tune and say, it's like this. And if you've never heard that, you SOL. You know what I mean? Like, you know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into as a team working with other people, like
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to do all that. And it's such an art to it, you know? Because I've had, this is just to go back to what you said before, when I interviewed on this podcast, Master Lewis Nash, one of the things he said, you know, growing up listening to all these masters, because I said something to him like, you've had a chance to play with so many of the masters, and he said, yeah. He said, listening to them on record and playing with them can be 100% different. Like you have this idea, oh, Ray Brown plays like this, and then you play with him and you're like, it's not like that. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Or anybody. And he's like, I've had the chance to play with a few of the masters, and it's interesting when it's them and you, and you're like, whoa, you know. It's not. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It can be either, but it's unique and different. So.
Well, I had it's funny that you mentioned that. I had an experience playing with Ben Riley.
Yes,
Probably.
I was there.
Was this in 96, 97, something like that?
I think 96.
It was with Milt Jackson, and I was filling in for Bob Cranshaw. He couldn't be there the first night. It was like a 4-night engagement, and so I played the first night. And I was used to this kind of like Ray Brown kind of slam you over the head with a sledgehammer kind of beat thing. And he was touching the drums so lightly and so softly that it just brought me completely back. Oh, okay, it's going to be that. Bing, ding, ding, ding. It was like the harder I played, the softer he played.
Yeah.
To kind of like do this with the music. And it wasn't what I expected at all.
Sure.
It was really, we as rhythm section players, we have to listen harder than anybody else
I agree.
on the bandstand.
And I think you have to have more reference points so you can find what it needs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because if I play with Paul, you know, with a singer who's just maybe just playing just normal standard repertoire, like it's almost like, I mean, you're still always trying to play your best, but you can almost like, okay, this is this kind of gig, and maybe another gig, it's going to be like, oh, we're going to get into like this thing that we do, like with Thoth Trio, we have a way of playing a Thoth Trio.
Totally.
It's different if we play.
No.
Like in the quartet under my name, like
Yep.
it's a different thing, but all that information is still transferable.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Totally.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of a bass player and a drummer who have that rapport, is you can do that.
Yeah.
There's that trust, but there's all those hours logged. So it's like, oh, okay, we're moving in this direction, and you both know where to stand, so to
Yeah.
speak. You know.
And also, I think it's important that we commit. I think every time we play, we commit to grooving.
Oh man.
We commit to swinging. We commit that it's going to have a feeling.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we rush, maybe we drag,
Sure,
whatever.
yeah.
It's going to have a feeling and a groove.
Yeah.
I played with a drummer of note in the last couple of years, and they ticked every box except for the swing box. Every box except for it wasn't quite swinging. Like I wanted to dig in and have it feel a certain way, and it never got there. Everything else was great, but I gotta have the groove. The swing
Yeah.
has gotta be there if I'm gonna feel like I can really dig into the music and contribute, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
I think too, like sometimes what's nice, and sometimes you meet a new player, you play one tune, you're like, this is like the kid Brandon Rose I play with I hate to call him a kid, he's 25, he's half my age.
Yeah.
So in Dan Wilson's quartet, we've been playing, and it's the first time I played with him, it was like 8 bars, you're like, this is gonna be a piece of cake.
Yeah.
And we've never had to talk about it, and it's always been great.
Yep.
And that's been 99% acoustic bass.
Yeah.
We started doing these gigs recently. We've only done one. We have one this week at the Cleveland Festival, but doing this Stevie Wonder music, where he's playing all electric bass, and I'm playing more of a dead bass drum, playing grooves. And I was like, oh, this is a chance to see what it's like doing something totally different. And it was the same experience.
Cool.
We just started playing. I never even had to think about that he was playing electric or that I was playing, laying into the bass drum or playing big backbeats.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, it's exactly the same as it feels when we played jazz.
That's great.
And you don't always get there. But what's nice about those connections, once it feels good, like how we said we never talk about it, it's like sometimes a look or a nod or a, like if I don't know something, if I know Paul will be like, you'll be cool. and normally that can be scary depending on who says that to you.
Of course.
But if you trust the person, you're like, oh, okay, I'm probably going to be
Absolutely.
cool.
Absolutely.
You know, or you look like, he's like, yeah, that's it. Like
Yeah.
that's going to work.
Yep.
So it's nice to have that, too.
Yeah, sometimes you need to lean on each other for different things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's part of the relationship, I think.
Yeah.
You know.
Like, this is just story time, but like, when I got the gig with Maynard Ferguson's band, I was 25, my first gig was on my 25th birthday. Paul got me on that band. I think it was like the 5th or 6th gig, we're like setting up for the gig, and I put the book on this. I don't know if you remember this. I put the book up, and Paul's like, "Man, put the book away." And I was like, "Dude, like, I just got the gig like a week before the gig,
Yeah.
and I've only played 5 shows." And Paul's like, "You know this stuff, man."
Yeah.
You know, because we were playing basically the same tunes every night. at that
Sure,
point.
sure.
So I think I threw up like 1 or 2 tunes just as a reference in case I needed them. But just hearing that and playing that in my head, I played the gig without the book. And it was the best thing I ever did because that made me learn how to play the gig.
Really play it, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Not
Sure.
just make
Of
stuff
course.
up on the page.
Of course.
Like start to realize, because before you're hearing with your eyes.
Yep.
So I'd make
Totally.
a shot just because it was there, not because it's the choice I wanted to make.
Sure, sure.
Yep.
So then you start figuring out how to play. So that's something maybe that's good to talk about in terms of like
It's great.
learning to play this music with your ears more so than with preconceived notions or being buried in the music.
Yeah.
We all need to read if it's a reading gig.
Of course.
Do you guys have anything to say about that?
I think that's true because I say this all the time at Duquesne, your ears bail you out more than your eyes ever will.
Yeah.
You know, so, and of course, I mean, when if you're sight reading, that's of course different. But if you're playing music every night, eventually, yeah, to really get to the music, you got to get off that page, you know, because again, your ears are going to tell you what's not on that page, you know. So I think both are important as far as that goes. Like, you know, being able to be comfortable reading, but knowing when it's like, okay, I got to focus on the other part now.
No,
you know?
totally. I tell my students, how well do you play an F blues, right? How well do you play that? That's how well you should play every tune.
Yeah.
You play an F blues that well because you're comfortable. You know it. You know the chord changes. You know a substitution that could come. You feel free within it. We should know every tune like we know an F blues.
Yeah.
And you should work to know a tune. The older I get, the more I'm against kind of reading cell phone changes on
Yep.
gigs. I hate that. I can't stand it. There's a vast library of music available to us on recordings. There are tunes we should know. You should, and you owe the music this to get your butt kicked, maybe 2 or 3 choruses, and to know a tune forever instead of reading your way through a tune and pretty much being 80-75% involved
Absolutely.
with playing
Yeah.
because you're reading the lines on your
Yeah.
phone. You know, I'm really big on that. The repertoire is a part of the gig. It's a part of learning jazz, knowing the tunes, knowing the recordings.
Of course.
At least being able to sing through stuff.
Yeah.
And all 3 of us, there's a great pianist who moved to town several years ago, Daniel May, that all 3 of us have had the honor of working with. Really funny guy. But who was not into charts.
Yeah.
And that was an adjustment for me because he wanted to do tunes I didn't know.
Yeah.
90% of the gig was stuff I was learning on the gig.
Yeah.
And I started realizing how important my ears were, you know. And in a perfect world, you should be able to read whatever is put in front of you, but also play without anything.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
So that's my goal. My goal is to be able to read great, but also contribute with my ears, hear things. You know, that's the total package, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, with younger guys, I mean, dealing with the technology, and it's cool. I don't knock it, but I mean, I've told younger, especially bass players, like, I would much rather you struggle through this right now. Don't worry, I'm not going to be angry because you're going to really learn this. Because it's
Yeah.
going to force you to be like, okay, what is that? And not just read whatever. And a lot of the changes aren't right on a lot of those. So I would much rather have a young musician struggle through it because they're going to really learn if they do that. Like, that's fine, man. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it goes back to what you said, though. You're really playing with your eyes
Yeah.
when you're buried in a chart like that.
Yeah.
You know, more than your ears, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to play what we hear.
Well, I think too, it's like when you said the one thing you wanted to do is feel great. You know, you want to, like the guy that checked every box, but the feeling great. Sometimes when I play with musicians who usually feel really good, and sometimes if they're reading, the feel goes out the window.
Oh, man.
Because they're like trying to look
Their
ahead,
brain is not in the right
and then
place,
they start
yeah.
rushing, and you're like, man, like I can't wait till you
Get off
I
that
got it,
page.
and it's like, okay, now we can.
Now
just
we can play, yeah.
Because that's what my ear wants to. I want it to feel like something.
Yeah.
And if it feels like you're reading, even if you're the only person that's reading, it's like, man, please come to us where we can play.
Yeah. Going back to what we said earlier, last night on a gig, I played that John Scofield tune, Groove Elation, which I know you guys play. And I had heard it before, but I had never played it. And there was a chart. The chart was good. And that groove is kind of cool. I found myself wanting to play more of like a Sister Cheryl kind of a groove, because that kind of works on it. But I forced myself to not do that. I was like, no, I can't do that. Let me try to play something that, you know, Bill Stewart or Idris Muhammad would play on it. And it was a real challenge, but I had to consciously say, like, no, don't do that you know. Like, try to come up with something else. And it was kind of whack, but I did my best.
But that's that's where you learn, though.
That's what I'm saying. And like knowing, like, okay, I can't do what I want to do right now. I'm gonna get better if I try to do this, you know, and having the freedom to do that and be able to kind of screw it up a little, maybe, you know, or like take a minute to kind of find, you know, I mean, how many times have we played on gigs and I'm trying to figure out what to play on a tune, you know, because sometimes you can't do it like that, you know.
Yeah.
And to have somebody that is gonna be kind of, you know, let you do that.
Well, it's quantity over quality. That's my thing. It's quantity over quality. You can't make a mistake if you're not trying to play something. And you got to get in there. You got to get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
You got to do it. That's why, and you've both played with me enough to know I rarely shake off a bass solo. You know, at times I think I play too many solos, but I want to be better at it.
Yeah.
So if you're going to give me an opportunity to play a bass solo, absolutely I'm going to jump in there because I want to get better.
Yeah.
I want it to be good.
Yeah.
So I choose quantity over quality every time.
Yeah.
Play, and play some more.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice, and that's hard, especially, I think we've talked about this, a lot of young people today, they're so used to watching these little videos that person might have done how many takes, and it's all perfect, and they think, I have to do that. Everything is performative. I'm performing. Where what you're saying is, yeah, you are, but you have to screw this up in order to get better. And people are like, no, I can't do that. And that's really the only way.
Absolutely.
You got to screw it up before you can do it right.
Absolutely.
You know?
And all three of us played gigs for 15 years before there was ever any social media, before anything was captured. You were playing to get better.
Yeah.
Every
Absolutely.
gig you were using to try to get better, get to the next gig. And we see these little bits of 20 seconds and 30-second, you know, TikTok clips where people are doing mind-blowing things inside of a little box, and then it goes to the next video. And that's not how it works. That's not how it works in real life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know.
And playing music, you can't do it by yourself in a room. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, you can do something. I mean, we all have to practice individually, but playing music is about that human interaction. And the only way to get better at that is to make mistakes while you're
well, that,
you know.
I mean, not to shift it, but that makes me think about Paul and I have had 2 bands that are all improvised bands.
Yeah.
And just even saying that, it makes you almost want to tremble with the thought of, like, there's no music. What are you going to play for a 3-hour gig or a 2-hour gig? And I think that doing that probably helped all of our other playing, because you start to, like, it's trust. We're saying the same things, but or stuff we've talked about. Like, we had a band called Beam, which was like a mix of, you know, hip hop and electronica, and, you know, kind of some fusion elements crept into there as well. But a lot of it is just like, okay, the gig's starting, I would just look at Paul and count off a tempo. There's no key, there's no bridge, there's no, you know, and it's just like, well, we gotta, like you always say, commit. You have to commit to it. And try to make it work. And that exercise of doing that, it helps everything.
Absolutely.
You know, like, try to play it like you mean it, so it maybe does come across sounding like the best things you get from those bands are when people say, oh, I really love that third song you played. Like, song?
What are you talking about? Yeah.
We're just messing around.
Yeah.
But that's the goal, is to make it sound like it's music all the time.
Sure.
And through the struggle And same goes with jazz. But
You
through
get better
the
at it.
struggles, you're learning stuff about yourself, what works, what doesn't.
Totally.
I need to stop doing that. I was always big on, I don't record a lot of gigs of me playing tunes, but I would record those gigs because those were the only gigs we did were improvisations.
Yeah.
So it's not like we go in the studio to make a studio record.
Sure.
So Landay, our other bass player in the band Beam, would record the gigs. I would listen to them, and then through that I would learn, like, oh, that's not working when I do that. That's not working. How much do you think about that when you're playing? Like, oh, this isn't working, or this is working
Sure.
all the time? I mean, are you thinking that?
I think if you're listening hard enough, if you're doing your number one job, which is to listen, everything usually reveals itself. You know,
Very true.
you can hear the notes that I'm playing. Is that working on the chord? Does that figure? Am I playing that with the drums? Am I playing in the wrong register? I mean, it all tends to reveal itself the harder you listen. And I also find that if I'm playing and it's not really happening, I have to listen harder. For some reason, when I listen harder, it really starts coming out. Like, all those things reveal themselves if you're listening hard enough. And a lot of people, especially, I noticed this with my high school students, a lot of amateurs, they don't know how to listen. They don't know how to listen to themselves.
Yeah.
They don't know how to really listen hard. Like, do you hear that third note you're playing is out of tune? Do you hear you're not in time? Do you know how to really listen to yourself? All my heroes, Chick Corea, John Coltrane, Miles, Vladimir Horowitz. Those guys know how to really listen to themselves and listen to everybody that they're playing with. And that's, to me, the older I get, the less it is about, man, I got to get my chops, to where it's, man, I got to listen.
Man,
I got to listen really hard.
That is 100% true. Now let's stay on that for a minute. So when you say, if you're in a situation where you feel like it's not happening, when you say listen harder, can you talk a little bit more about that? Like how, I mean, you're listening to everything, but is there, I'm not quite sure how to frame the question, but like what are you listening for? Or are you just trying to take everything in more? Or
Yeah, I'm trying to, my first goal is to kind of step back like it's a painting.
Yeah.
And see the whole thing.
Yeah.
And if I can't do that, then I'll step in a little bit.
Okay.
So it might start with one person or one thing.
Okay.
If I have a hard time listening, it might be just the soloist. It might be just the soloist, and then I'm bringing in the ride cymbal. It might be the ride cymbal and the comping of the piano. If I can't hear everything really, really closely, what I do is I try to zoom in on one or two things to make that picture kind of focus, and then I can step back and draw back. But I'm trying to listen for that. I'm also listening for feeling. Does it feel a certain way?
Yeah.
Is there a feeling, and especially in jazz, it's got to move ahead. It's got to have forward motion.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you both know this, when it's not happening, it almost feels like you're stepping on your feet,
Yeah.
like it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You're in a car, you're pushing the gas, and you're not moving.
Yeah.
I want to feel like, is there some momentum? Is there motion? Is there feeling to it? But the main thing is zooming in and out for me. And here's an interesting thing. The harder I listen to myself, the worse I play. If I'm like right here, ba-ba-doo-doo, ba-doo-ba-doo, I play awful. The more I can zoom out, and for me, I want to talk about this actually on my YouTube channel. I'm going to do a video about this summer. For me, it's my eyes. My eyes really key the whole thing. If I close my eyes, I play awful. I play awful. It makes me incredibly self-conscious.
Wow.
And I hear myself. And I know for some cats, they close their eyes and it makes them play better.
Sure.
They search more. When I close my eyes, it's like everything is blocked out but me. So I have to keep my eyes open. I have to find something to look at or someone to look at.
Oh, wow.
If I can get outside of my head, then I feel like my ears get 100 times bigger.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
I can go both ways. Sometimes I feel like I need to have my eyes open, even if I'm not cueing in on other musicians I'm playing with my eyes. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I feel like I can eliminate some distraction.
Sure.
And then I feel like I can hear more.
I'm kind of the same. It could go either way for me, depending on the setting.
I've been
Yeah.
studying cats too. I mean, if you ever see Chris Potter, he's like this.
Yeah.
He's like totally like, and his eyes are like just scanning everything. Train was like that, where his eyes were kind of scanning things. But then some guys like, you know, Keith Jarrett, he's like
Yeah.
very eyes shut,
Yeah.
you know? But for me, I have to, it helps my listening though. We talked about hearing with your eyes. For some reason, I got to keep my eyes open, and what I'm seeing kind of disappears if I keep my eyes open and I'm just listening. That's what I want. I want no self-consciousness.
Yeah.
I want total listening, even myself.
Yeah.
Well,
You know?
I think if you can get to that place where you're not thinking so much, is usually when it's, for me, when it's the most happening.
Absolutely. I mean, your
When you're
brain.
not caught up, you're just kind of, it's just not automatic pilot totally, but it's just feeling natural.
Totally.
It's a great feeling.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like-
For me, it's the older I get. I mean, as a young drummer, I play a lot. You know what I mean? You know that. I mean, you may hate it at times and love it at times. There's things about that are certain situations that are great. But I feel like the older I get, in some ways I play less and less. But I still have moments where I play a lot. But I just keep thinking about, like I can't make it all happen. I've noticed that a long time ago. I have to
Yes.
you know, some of the
Yes.
improvising bands you think like I need to make a statement that'll help stuff along, and sometimes you do need to be, if it's your vision and your direction, you need to be able to make a decision and live with it. But when stuff unfolds, it's usually like I'm with Beam or with Throckmorton Plot. I feel like the more you don't force it, it's gonna get somewhere magical. But if you try to force it too much, it's not going to find that place. I'm kind of rambling a little bit.
No. I'm glad you brought that up.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like I want to be able to leave space, and I want to learn to do more without being so forceful. And for me, another point is because I don't have, you know, we're playing the tune, we're aware of the tune, we're aware of the form, but I can't play the right notes over that chord with the drums. I can't.
Right.
But I need to sound like I am. But for me, it's I can do so much with space and so much with dynamics, and that's the stuff I really think about a lot. Like I feel like the more we play, like in Thoth Trio, for instance, a trio we play with, I feel like our softer has gotten way softer in the last 5 years than it ever was the first
I agree.
10 years.
That's interesting.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we'll play unbelievably soft.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, it's just widening the dynamic range, which for me is like, that's what we have to work with.
Of course.
As drummers.
Yeah. No, that's that's all very true. To go back to the first point about forcing things, that's one of the most frustrating things when you're playing music is when it's not happening and you feel like I gotta do something. And to even if the music is not happening, to be like, okay, I'm gonna do my job and we're just gonna kind of let this. That takes so much patience and so much acceptance of it not being very good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's trust.
It's trust.
Trust in yourself.
Yeah.
You know, it's total trust.
But also what you said, it's not all on me.
Yeah.
There's 2, 3, 5 other people up here. Like it's not all on me.
Yeah.
It's us together, and that's hard when maybe somebody's not on the same page or whatnot. But I think one thing I'm starting to learn finally after how many years is like you got to be okay with that sometimes. Like you got to be okay with like, okay, this isn't going to be a great gig, you know, but we can still make music, but it's not going to be great. But it's hard, especially, you know, when you're playing and some bad dude walks in and you're like, oh, this is great. I suck. You know what I mean? It's like you have to be okay with it because the more you force it, the more it just kind of it's never going to happen. You know, that's such a hard thing to get good at, you know, is sort of realizing like, I have a part in this, but it's not all, I'm not responsible for this, solely responsible for this being great or not, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of drummers and bass players, some musicians in a band feel like it's the drummer's role to play time.
Right.
Some bass players feel like it's my role to play time.
Yes.
And not the drummer.
Yeah.
I mean, they are doing it too. Some musicians think, you guys keep time together and I'll just play over top of you. I think it's everybody's job to be involved with the time.
Yeah.
But I think you have to have the ability to look in at yourself and say, I need to play great time.
Of course.
You guys agree with that?
Of course.
Absolutely.
It's everybody's job to play with great time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think that only gets more and more important the longer you play. You know?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So maybe enough about that. I have a question for you.
Sure.
In hopes that it's just good information. So one thing I talked with Tom and Mike about a bunch, and other friends that play drums, or students. I've been really into this concept for a long time of same way if I produce a track for somebody, if I'm working with a singer or an arrange, I'm kind of good at coming up with arrangements and knowing what's not necessarily what's missing, but what's too much. Mm-hmm. I'm good at getting rid of stuff, like editing.
Yeah, yeah.
Like Jeff from Good Brother Earl, he always says I'm a good editor.
Yeah.
You're good at why do you need that there? Get rid of that. Why is there so much reverb on the voice? Or what?
That's a great skill, though.
And I think about music that way a lot. So from practicing, performing, I find sometimes the less options I have on the drums, the better. We talked about this earlier today, listening to great musicians play. So maybe I'm teaching somebody who's trying to figure out how to comp better against the ride cymbal beat in jazz. I might say something as simple as play everything you just played without the hi-hat. Don't play 2 and 4. And just listen to what that sounds like. It's the same stuff, but now there's a limb missing. Now play it without the bass drum and just play a hi-hat, bass drum, and snare drum. Or maybe just play the hands.
Sure.
And then when you take your foot off the pedal, when you really want to play something, when you hear it, bring it back in. So maybe it becomes less pattern playing. Is there a way that concept relates to bass at all for you?
Sure. I mean, physically, there's an exercise that I do with my students where I try to make them solo on one string.
Oh, wow.
And it can't be the high string, solo on the 3rd string and see what you're hearing. That's a thing. Also, I think playing arco, which I try to do every gig, can be very elusive. It's hard because when it's bad, it's awful. It's one of the worst sounds ever. But
we're talking about playing with the bow.
I'm sorry, playing with the bow on the bass. But that also, when I pick up the bow, it automatically kind of puts everything in a box. Okay, I can't do this, and this.
Oh, wow.
I have to be really direct about what I'm going to play.
Wow.
And almost simplistic about how I'm going to state it. Because the bow has a different kind of voice.
I never thought of it like that. Wow.
And you know this too as well. There are times on gigs, especially with a quartet, where there's a tune we play, a Joe Lovano thing that's just one chord.
Yeah. Blackwell's Message.
Blackwell's Message. I was soloing on that tune, and I got to a point where I felt like, this is stupid. I'm just trying to solo over one chord. What if I just play rhythm?
Yeah.
Yes.
And just started playing bass notes and punctuating things and going into different keys.
Yeah.
And so that...
And I'm sure I reacted to that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
But sometimes, So approaching it from there, all right, I'm not going to play linear things. I'm just going to play rhythm and try to punctuate sounds and come out with the rhythm. That's another way you can kind of shave off the excess.
Well, did you have something on that? So I'll say this too, I've heard you say this before in clinics and stuff like that. And this might not relate to every scenario of playing music, but a lot of them. And I've heard you say rhythm is paramount. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Almost like rhythm trumps everything else.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I feel like that. I'd rather hear somebody feel good and play some wrong notes than play right notes and have it feel like crap.
Any day of the week. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally. And the older I get, this is funny. I'm going to be 50 in February. My ability to play wrong notes has gotten better as I get older. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I mean, when you're young and somebody says, don't play a B flat, and you hit that B flat, and it's like, oh.
Yeah.
And then when you get older, you're like, I wonder what will happen if I play that B flat.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you have this power.
Yeah.
You're learning how to play the wrong notes and make them work.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, that's great. That's
yeah,
really good.
yeah, wow. There's so much in there. No, it's true. It's true. I think along those lines, I know for me, when I'm playing and it's not happening, if I start to just play less, it immediately gets a little bit better.
Yeah.
Really, especially like
back
those.
To that idea I was talking about, taking stuff away a little bit.
Exactly.
Even if it's your thoughts
Yes.
or your
Yes.
volume or how many notes you're playing, you just like, let me simplify a little. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's it. It's like, especially those times when you feel like this isn't happening, I got to do something, instead of like, I'm not going to do anything. And all of a sudden it kind of goes like, like that. And then there's a chance for the music to sort of develop in some kind of way, you know? And that's hard to do, and because you can't critique yourself while you're playing.
No way.
That's a surefire way to have a horrible gig. Like, you got to just be like, here it is. It might be cool. It might be terrible.
Yeah.
But here it is. You know?
Right.
That's hard.
When you play, it goes into the ether.
Yeah.
It's taken me years to grasp that.
And then it goes on to Facebook after that.
Yes. But every note you play goes into the ether.
Yeah.
That's it. It's gone.
It's
It's
in the wind.
over. It's done, which is why, I mean, especially as of recently, my motto is quantity over quality. Play. Just play. Don't think. Don't try to hit a home run.
Yeah.
Just swing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I've told this story a bunch. I don't think on here, but when I was on Maynard's band, the nights I felt like I was playing great, I'd hear the recordings back, and they were okay. The nights I felt like I wasn't playing as great were usually the better nights.
Yeah.
And for me, I learned to figure out, like, oh, I'm trying new things.
Yeah.
I'm hearing growth
yeah.
and change. I saw Dave Weckel at a clinic when I was like 20 or something. I saw him a million times, and I asked a question once about that. I said, man, I feel like I'm just getting worse. And he's like, you're probably getting way better.
Wow.
And it was really exciting to hear that.
Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're probably changing.
Yeah.
You're probably growing.
Absolutely.
And you're not used to what you're playing. And then, so like by age 25 on Maynard's band, I start to hear that and think, because I was always bold. I was always not afraid to play. But it's like, man, the more I try, the more I'm liking the results. I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but I think you have to not be afraid to play, and not be afraid of the changing, because if you just stick to your habits,
right.
there might not be any growth in that.
That's what I was talking about playing a tune last night. It was
Yeah.
like, let me not do what I know I can do. Let me try to fashion a groove that's going to work for this.
Or when you've told me when you get to play free, how much you feel like you learn, you know?
It's amazing. Yeah, and that's, as far as our relationship, I think you guys have played a lot more free improvised music than we have.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've played a lot more just straight ahead stuff, and I think, no, go ahead.
No, you're right. I think you're right. And we don't talk about it a lot, but I have heard Paul say, like, sometimes, man, I feel like I'm starting, like 20 years later, I feel like I'm starting to figure out what to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where I felt like it was good all the time. But I do hear growth.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I think I said to you a couple weeks ago, I was like, man, we're figuring out how to, we're getting in some new stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes time.
Yeah.
It
You know?
always takes time. That's why it's so hard. Is it's
You know?
not just like that. But
Yeah.
I think as far as going back to the bass drum relationships, learning how to play very free music with a bass player, there's an art to that, but then there's also an art to like totally like taking care of business in
Hooking
a
up.
situation
Yeah.
where it's about that. It's not about let's see what we can create. It's like, let's make this music and this person sound really, really
Yeah.
good.
Yep.
You know, and that's like, I'm more into that personally, you know, even though I love the chance to play very creatively.
Yeah.
But man, that's such a, like, learning like what works for different kinds of tunes, tempos, grooves, different kinds of singers versus different kinds of piano players versus different kinds of guitar players.
Yeah.
You know, like playing with someone who comes out of Kenny Burrell and Wes Montgomery is totally different than someone who comes out of Mick Goodrick and John Abercrombie.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Totally different. Like, those are two completely different guitar trios.
Yeah.
Well, I had to talk about this with my wife the other day because I played with a kind of famous musician recently. I won't mention any names. But the experience was good and bad.
Yeah.
It was good because this cat had so much talent, He was so good. And I think extreme talent will always be here, but it's the professionalism. It's professionalism, being able to communicate with other musicians, being able to speak their language, letting somebody know, here, one time I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you, we're going to do this. We don't have to go over it again. Like the professional thing
Totally.
is what really separates, in my world. We've played with the David Budways and the Maureen Budways and the Roger Humphreys and the Luce DeLutz and the all the wonderful musicians we grew up playing with, and they taught us how to be professionals.
Absolutely.
They taught us how to take care of business.
Yeah.
They taught us, there's something I love about the attitude of, I'm here to play and make you sound good, and we are going to sound good tonight.
Yeah.
That kind of professionalism, and not just bringing talent.
Yes.
Not just bringing, and what I think we're going to keep seeing is really talent is always going to be around, but the ability to show up and play a whole gig and know tunes and play in a certain way and play with a singer and play with a guitar player and really make people sound good.
Do you remember that outdoor gig we did with Marlene Verplank?
Oh my God, yes.
And Ted Firth. So Marlene Verplank she's a jazz singer, but she's a little more of a cabaret singer, and she's great. Like she goes all the way back to the 50s, and her husband is a great arranger named Billy Verplank, who wrote a lot of commercial. He's a very good arranger. So Paul and I did this outdoor gig with her, and a wonderful pianist from New York named Ted Firth. And Billy, her husband, was there. And I'll never. This was really nice. I don't know if you remember this, but we played this gig. We were reading her charts, which were we had like one short little run through, and we played the gig, and it was cool. Like we did fine. And I'll never forget Billy Verplank came right up to the stage after we were done, and he looked at you and me and he said, "You guys are in the right business."
Wow.
Wow, I don't remember.
It was a really nice compliment, and I thought
oh, that's cool.
That's cool, you know what I mean? To me that said these guys showed up, they played the music well, they were professionals, they were good people. I'll never forget that. I'd never had anybody say something like that to me before.
That's nice.
You're used to people saying man, you sound great, but if somebody's saying man, you guys are in the right business. It was that's really cool.
That's cool. Monroeville, right?
Yeah. It was very hot on a very horrible sounding stage. That could be a whole other podcast, dealing with horrible situations.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, man.
Listen to some tunes.
Yeah.
Almost at the hour mark.
Okay. Yeah, we had picked a few different recordings to listen to, just that were meaningful for our sort of relationship. You want to go first?
No, why don't we start with your stuff?
Okay. All right. So the first thing that I chose, Paul introduced me to a lot of really great records, but probably one that is one of my favorites is Herbie Hancock's "Speak Like a Child." I remember listening to this with you in the CRX. Paul's first car was a little Honda CRX. We used to drive around listening to.
I remember listening to the Yellow Jackets with him.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. But "Speak Like a Child" is one of my favorite records, and we listened to that a lot, and we sort of talked about how the great Ron Carter and Mickey Roker played together. So I chose, of course, "Toys."
Oh,
going into the piano solo. So let's check that out, and then we'll. Double stop. I mean,
feels pretty good.
you know what I mean? I mean, Now, some people might hear that and be like, yeah, that's nice. They're not doing anything. But, of course, you know,
Amazing.
that just letting the groove kind of guide the music. You know, those guys were so great at that. But, of course, Ron's playing all those incredible... Go ahead, man.
Good.
Talk about it.
Do you remember? So we hung out with Milt Jackson.
Yes.
When he played at the balcony.
Yep.
And Mickey Roker was on the gig. And you asked Mickey Roker, man, how'd you end up on that Speak Like a Child record with Herbie?
Yep.
And what did he say?
He said that Herbie called him. This was 1968, and Herbie called him and he said, "Yeah, I can do that, but don't you want to call Tony Williams? I mean, Ron's on it. Him and Ron have this." And Herbie said, "Yeah, Tony's great, but he doesn't swing like you." He told me that. I was like,
Wow.
which is, it's amazing because, you know, Herbie, Ron, and Tony they created such incredible, but when you introduce a different person into that, it's still great. It's just a different thing.
Yeah.
You know, I remember hearing this and just, you know, the way that Mickey Roker just kind of lets everything happen. He's not in there like, no, let's, you know, he's just kind of letting it, you know, all happen, and he's just making it feel good, you know, while everything's going on. You know?
And Ron is so good. The thing I really love about him, so if you listen to Ray Brown, a lot of his is attack, where he's putting that boom, ding,
the point
ding,
on it,
ding.
yeah.
And Ron's thing was less attack and more how wide can I make the note.
Totally.
So it's like da, da,
Yeah.
da, da,
Yeah.
da. And when you add that ride cymbal, it's just da, da, yep, da, bo, da.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, it's fat.
Yeah.
so good.
And
so
it's
good.
that forward motion you were talking about. Even when there's not a lot of notes, it still has that beautiful, like,
Bouncing.
yeah,
That hump, you know.
Yep.
And when I still do this. I don't know if you guys do this or not. I still have this like imposter syndrome where sometimes I try to play like my heroes. And when I really want to swing hard, I go into this kind of Ron Carter mode where I try to make my notes super long.
Yeah.
Because it's just, to me, he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT of walking bass. Nobody swings like that. He's incredible.
I can't disagree with that, but I you know what I'm going to say. It's because he studied all that stuff that came before him.
Absolutely.
You know, boo, boo-dee, boo-dee, that's
Yes,
Paul
that's a
Chambers.
PC, yes.
You know what I mean? Like, that's beautiful because he's unquestionably Ron Carter.
Yeah.
But you hear the lineage coming up
Absolutely.
to it. So
Absolutely.
I just wanted to play that because I love that. Man.
Love it.
What you got, man?
Well, I was saying earlier, I could have picked anything.
I know, there's
we were
so
trying
much.
to cover different styles.
Yeah, the spectrum.
So I just picked some stuff that I knew influenced both of us. We probably played a few of these grooves, like at soundcheck or things like that, just fooling around. Or like one of us would start it and the other one would jump in, like, oh, I know what that is.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So there was these two David Sanborn records that came out in the 90s. And my friend Josh Dunleavy, who plays saxophone, he got this one called Up Front, and he's like, Rock, I think you should check this out. I think you'll really like it. And I heard it, and I was like, man, this is amazing. And Steve Jordan's on drums. Marcus Miller produced the records, plays bass. Don Elias, Ricky Peterson. I think Dean Brown's on one.
Dean
Spaceman's on some of it.
Yeah.
Just the amazing rhythm sections.
I've heard this. I've heard these, but
And it actually, that like, I was all fusion and you know, at that time. And I remember tearing down my like fusion setup and setting up like my Gretsch toms with like a Pearl bass drum, like a dead bass drum, and like a ride and a crash, and just playing along these grooves for like months and just trying to learn to make it try to emulate it. But these are really from track to track on these albums. One's called Up Front, one's called Hearsay. For me, it was like all these radically different feels, and I was like, man, like you have to learn how to make these feels happen. Did you feel like that with these records?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like also Marcus's kind of production turned into this real organic. I don't know. There's something about those two records.
Well,
that's
the
really
records before
organic.
that seemed a little more up and down or something, and these were a little slipperier.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally. But
You know, less drum machiney,
more
less
soulful.
Yeah. And there's so many. Let's put on Should we listen to the first track? We do Snakes, or should we do Soul
Sure,
Set?
no, Snakes is a good one.
We can put on Snakes. It's the first tune off the
That
first.
drum groove is unmistakable.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
And it's
Killing
in a
it.
way like what you said about the Mickey Roker thing. Like somebody might think there's nothing to it.
Yeah.
But I always say this, like try to make it feel like that.
Yeah, try you do it.
Yeah.
You know what I remember? I have two things to say. I remember seeing them do this on The Tonight Show.
I saw that too.
Oh, wow.
They did this and they did Bang Bang.
Yeah. The hit.
And it was incredible.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my
Same-
God.
same
'cause-
band?
Same band. Marcus was playing.
Oh,
He
man.
was kind of directing everybody. But this was a time, you know what I love about this time is we got records and we just assimilated the whole record from front to back. Like, I mean, it was like $20 or whatever to get a CD. You spent your hard-earned money. So we didn't have everything available to us, so
Yeah.
we listened to that stuff like crazy.
Yeah.
And we knew every single little fill and every track.
Everything.
And we would assimilate that stuff. And I remember up front being so excited with that record and just, I might have had that. This might be when, so if I didn't have enough money, I'd buy it on tape.
Right, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
So I might have had this on cassette. And I just, you know,
I had it on tape first as well. Yeah,
Like-
for sure.
You break
Like-
the tape eventually. Yeah.
totally, like crazy. You're just listening to it
Over
over
and
and
over.
over and over again. You know every solo, every groove. I think we benefited from that so much.
Yeah.
Rather than kind of, here's the...
Snippets of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, get into this album deeply for the next month, know everything, and then move on to the next record. We got a lot out of that.
Oh, man.
And I think it was different than the fusion music we loved, and that this was repetitive music, you know? And we all heard songs growing up, pop songs,
Sure.
and like our parents would play music of like, whatever it would be. It could be like my brother playing, you know, I don't even know what, like, you know, like you hear Journey in the house. My brother's playing, or my dad's playing Headhunters, or my mom's playing some Barbra Streisand, Guilty. Like, you're hearing songs,
Yeah.
and you're thinking about playing songs, or like MTV culture. I always reference.
Sure.
You just hear all these hit
Sure.
songs, but like the stuff that as a player you get excited about drumming. I want to play all this stuff, and this I was like, man, I got to learn to just lay this shit down.
Play the music. That's
You
right.
know?
Absolutely.
And the sounds are so important.
Sound.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, man. I got to see if that Tonight Show clip is on YouTube, is it?
It probably is.
I'd love to see that.
Because Bang Bang, I would guess, is probably on there.
That was
they,
the
they
hit.
did. So they remade that song Bang Bang.
Yeah.
And they did it, and that was the big. They must have had 30 people on stage in my memory.
Yeah, yeah.
But they did that, but they did Snakes, which was really like, oh my God. It was one of those moments like, wow, Marcus is on The Tonight Show.
They're
This
playing
is
that on
amazing.
TV.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
It was really cool.
Wow. Man. Yeah, that's that art of, like, you talk about repetitive music, you know, being able to do everything you were just saying, like let the music happen, like focusing on something, but you're also interacting at the same time in different ways, you know. That
Yeah.
man, it takes a lot of maturity and patience to, you know, play like that, you know.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, I mean, you know, when you're playing, you might hear like, oh, I could do this, but then it's like, should I do that? You know?
Well, this kind of music humbles you in that way.
Totally.
It's like if you're not fitting in, you're not playing it. You're
Yeah.
not doing it right.
Yeah.
You know, I played in a pop rock band when I was 24. And it sounded fine. I'm sure if I heard it back, I'd be like, oh, that sounds maybe even a little better than I thought I did. But I didn't realize that my concept wasn't so much thinking about like being repetitive. It was more like I have room to play here.
Yeah.
And now when I play those gigs, it's like, man, I gotta just like come up with a part and just nail it and be repetitive and groove and have a nice sound.
Good sound. Groove.
It's not about like what can I interject.
What can I fit in here?
And even guys will be like, well, why don't you solo? I'm like, I don't need to solo on this.
Yeah.
This isn't. And they're like, well, you should. People will like it. Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I just want to, And that's what's fun about playing the pop songs or playing this kind of stuff. It's just playing a different role than maybe you play in your jazz world. Or
of course.
I mean, not that jazz is always playing a bunch of stuff. Sometimes it's just laying it down as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, that's what Marcus represented to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was like fat, amazing sound. You could always hear him. He was playing relatively simple, but it was just perfect.
Yeah.
And grooving. Like, wow. Like in 4 bars, he could make you like want to quit.
Well, it's funny. I went and saw Marcus's band 7, 8, 9 years ago, whenever that Aphrodisia record came out. Brett was in the band, Cliff was on the record.
Yeah.
I went and saw it. I was off one night. I was like, well, I should go see Marcus at the Guild. And the feeling I got from that, still, I was in my 40s. I was like, man, everything he plays is in the pocket. Everything he plays sounds good. And everything he plays feels great.
Mm-hmm. I saw him play at the Pittsburgh Festival a number of years ago when Brett was playing. And this was live in the street. And I was blown away by his sound and everything you just said. It sounded like a record.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like everything he did sounded perfect and it was all there. And I'm thinking like, man, if he can sound like that on a metal stage in the middle of that's amazing.
Well, also, you got to take into account that he wrote that song. He wrote most of the songs on that record. Yeah. He produced the record.
Yeah.
He's playing keyboard on half the stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's just
bass clarinet.
He made me want to not just be a good bass player. Up to that point, I was like, okay, I want to be a good bass player. And then I heard Marcus, and I was like, man, I got to write something. I want to be able to do everything like a musician with a capital M, as Ron Carter says.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think something, too, like from all my favorite musicians, whether it's guys like this or jazz musicians, whatever, or even like great singer-songwriters, is for me, like, it was always about keeping, like, your standards high. So for me, it was always like, I remember Paul Wells told me this when we were young. He's like, man, like, a lot of my friends just want to, like, be as good as their friends.
Right.
He's like, you're, like, always trying to be as good as your heroes.
That's right.
I'm like, I'm not as good as them, but why not set the bar really high?
Yep.
So for this, it was like, man, I want to try to make it feel good all the time.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying I can do it.
Right.
But that's the goal.
That's the goal.
Yeah. When I saw Tito Puente's band, I was like, how do you make it feel like that? So it's always that with me. It's like, I want to be able to do it on the highest level. And I think, I think that's something that we could say to young musicians too, is like, shoot for the stars, man. Like try to live up to those standards you set for yourself of being great.
And that doesn't,
doesn't mean you will all the time, or doesn't mean, but like, at least you're shooting high.
You got to aim for that, yeah. And that has nothing to do with likes or comments.
Yeah.
I hate to be the one to say it,
algorithms.
right? Yeah, algorithms.
I will say though, like not to, because we're not trying to trash anybody.
No. Absolutely.
If we were young, we would be doing all the same stuff.
Of course.
So it's not a knock.
Yeah.
But we benefited from having to buy the records, from having to get our butts kicked by older musicians.
Yeah.
Seek that stuff out,
I think what you said before is really important, like assimilating an entire record. I mean, there's so much that you get out of that. It's not just learning to play better, but you're learning how to hear at a deeper level. So much of today, it's all surface. It's just, oh yeah, that's cool, I checked that out, that's cool, but did you really check it out?
Yeah.
There's a big difference. I remember talking to older musicians who were around in the 40s. Charlie Parker would put 2 78s out per year. That's roughly 12 minutes of music. That's all you got.
Yeah.
So that's why when you talk to, there's very few of those guys left, but when you meet them, you say, oh yeah, Bird's record of, Bird, they know every single part of that because they listen to it over. And that assimilation process, I think, is an important thing.
You two guys, I will say you're both like the Library of Congress as far as it comes to records. I don't know anybody that has as many records as the two of you, and I'm always getting hip to stuff from the two of you because you guys have the recorded history of everything, basically. But I saw Pat Metheny when I was in college, when I was a freshman in college. He came, he was playing at A.J. Palumbo, so they brought him to Duquesne, and he said, I'm not going to play. I will sit in the classroom and answer questions for like an hour. And he said when he was growing up, he said, I didn't get a lot of records. He said, I think I got the 30 most important jazz records of all time. And he said, I learned every note on every single record that everybody was playing, you know?
Wow.
And that was his process, which kind of gave me, that also kind of gave me, you know, hope. Okay, let me get what I think is a great record. It could be kind of blue.
Of
And
course,
let me
should be.
study the heck out of it. Let me know what everybody's playing on every song, and I'll be a better musician for that, you know.
You know what I've been doing lately is I've been actually going back to those like essential records, and I'll take on CD, I'll take one of them and I put it in my car for a couple weeks, and that's all I listen to in my car. Like I did Cannonball Something Else, you know, just, and it's amazing, like records that I listened to a lot before, going back and listening to them, like we were saying earlier.
New ears, yeah.
New ears, you know, and to be able to just be patient enough to do that. Because today there's just so much stuff that's just constantly coming at you know?
You can't do everything.
Of course,
And
absolutely.
you have to know that. So,
Yeah.
so I think if you're skimming over stuff too much, trying to do everything, you're not going to find what it is that you do.
Yep.
So like you said, like what Pat said, what you did, and you did the same thing. So yeah, I might have been listening to the Chick Corea Electric Band, and maybe I also heard like Stevie Wonder records in my house at the same time. But I knew those.
Yes.
I wasn't hearing all the records that I have now.
Right.
Now I buy stuff because I'm curious.
What is that?
And you're
Yeah.
hoping you find something that you fall in
Sure.
love with. So sure, you could put any of the records, thousands of records I have on. I'm going to know what they are.
Yeah.
But there's maybe 400 of those 3,500 that I really, really know.
Of course.
No, but that was a compliment.
No,
that was
I know it
totally
was.
a compliment.
No, no.
You guys,
No, we check out. We check it
I
out.
wish I could approach having the kind of library of music that you both have. It's amazing.
But all I meant is that you have to check out stuff
Yeah.
over and over,
Over
to
and over.
learn something.
Yeah.
If you only heard a clip of this and that, you're not going to learn to do it. So I agree that you have to
Oh my gosh.
to figure that stuff out. And what you practice and what you play, you have to do it over and over and over to develop it.
Yeah. I remember Marvin Smitty Smith talking about when he was at Berkeley, he used to do a monthly thing. So he said for 1 month, the only drummer I would listen to would be
Jimmy Cobb.
Right.
Yeah.
Next month, all I would listen to is Billy Higgins. The next month, you know what I mean? And it was the same process of like, let me try to get inside this person's style as much as I can, and just that assimilation of like,
Yeah.
so that it becomes a part of you in some sort of a way. I mean, that process is important.
Yeah.
And, you know,
That's definitely what I did.
me too.
Was taking my favorite drummers, not only trying to play along to records,
Yep.
try to play like them, but even more so for me was try to figure out how they got their sound.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Totally. Yeah, 100%.
we could do 30 of these.
I know. We should probably wrap it up because
Yeah.
we're over time, but we'll do it again, man. There's so much more to talk about and listen to.
If anyone's who's seeing this or listening, check out Paul's YouTube channel. It's really great.
PD bass.
PD bass. Lots of amazing information about bass, and not just bass, but music is for everyone.
And drummers, check it out because you'll get a lot of insights as to what bass players are doing and thinking about. I mean, I've learned a lot watching it, so
Yeah.
PD bass.
That wraps up episode 10 of the Drum Candy Podcast. If you like the show, please give us a review on Spotify or iTunes. Give us a share on YouTube if you don't mind. If you're not subscribing to our YouTube channel, make sure you do so there. Hit me up with any requests or questions at drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. We appreciate you listening, and we'll be back next week.